Good evening. I'm hoping that we're streaming. I have no idea what the hell is going on. Things seem to have gone awry since I streamed on Rumble. It's just YouTube being YouTube, I guess. I'm not seeing any chat. Is there anybody in the chat? Says I've got 7 concurrent viewers. The chat gone. Bloody hell, this is like going back in time. Like 3 years ago when we used to do it with Ben. Ah, right. Now I found the chat. That's something. Right, people. We are here. Right. So, good evening. Can you all hear me all right? All good. Right. Okay, well, we seem to be managing a stream even though YouTube says there's an error. I have no idea what's going on. But we'll fix it at some point, as long as you can hear me. It's Wednesday night. Loud and clear, Sarge, says Shalini. Thank you, Shalini. Julie, Shalini, the regulars are there. Thank God for that. Dreadeye and Julie, greetings, Earthling. Yep, indeed. Right. I don't know if I've missed anyone in the chat earlier. No, I don't think. Oh, Ray. Good evening, Ray. Good evening. Right. Good. Let's crack on then. What I'm going to do tonight is I've prepared a little script and I'm going to read it to you because I was having some thoughts the other day, and it's just I was having some thoughts about how we are manipulated, and in particular I was thinking about soldiers, and this was probably after my chat that I had with Soldier on YouTube. So what I thought I'd do is I thought I'd do a little bit of research into this and see if I could refine my thought processes, and I think I have a little bit. So let's crack off. I'm supposed to. So hold on, let me see if I can do this. No. Hey there, truth seekers. Sgt Grumpy here, coming at you live from my bunker in Glasgow. Before we dive in, smash that. I can't do it. I'm supposed to say smash that like button. And if you're new here, subscribe to join our growing army of critical thinkers. I just can't do it. Can't do it straight. Can I? No, I can't. I need to. Yeah, I need to start pretending more. We all need to be actors, don't we? We don't do tinfoil hats here. We do evidence and critical thinking. Tonight, we're tackling something different from our usual fare of cryptids and UFOs. We're looking at something potentially more insidious. How military recruitment targets idealistic young people, and what happens when that idealism crashes into reality. As a 20-year police veteran, I've seen my fair share of institutional manipulation. I can assure you of that. But what we're discussing tonight might surprise even the most cynical among you. Let me tell you something interesting. Military recruitment isn't random. It's a calculated process that deliberately targets young people's natural idealism. Take the British Army's 2020 recruitment campaign, and they specifically went after teenagers lacking self-confidence, promising them confidence that lasts a lifetime. But here's where it gets properly dodgy. A marketing brief for the British Army's 2017 recruitment campaign explicitly identified their core regular target audience as 16 to 24-year-old, primarily C2DE, with a mean household income of 10k. In normal people speak, that means they're targeting working class kids from poorer families. They even specifically targeted economically disadvantaged areas in northern cities and Welsh regions. Is anyone really surprised? Because the sales pitch isn't come risk your life for corporate interests. It's serve your country, find purpose, be part of something greater. And when you're young and idealistic, that's powerful stuff. I mean, we were all young at some point, and I'm pretty sure we all had our ideals. And then they use class and exploit it by trying to divide that class. There's a similar story across the pond. American recruiters focus heavily on disadvantaged communities where economic opportunities are slim. And for many kids, military service represents one of the few available pathways to education, healthcare, and social mobility. Healthcare and education, both very costly enterprises in America. So let's have a look. Are we getting any chat? Yes, we are. Good. Ray says, most of the best SAS soldiers are from economically deprived areas. Well, most of the best soldiers, most of the soldiers are from economically depressed areas, Ray, to be fair. Right. So I'm sure some of you are thinking, but Sarge, the military does provide opportunities. And you're not wrong. You are not wrong, because the military does. It trains people how to use, not just weapons, as we think about the military being involved in war, but, there's a whole team of people that are repairing ships, repairing tanks, engineering, building bridges, being nurses, being doctors. There's a whole team of people doing all these different tasks and learning something that they're going to be able to use in the civilian world once they leave. But at what cost? That's the problem. What is the cost to these opportunities? This travelling the world, this learning a trade. What is it actually costing them? And I don't mean monetary. So are recruits fully informed about what they're signing up for? Now, this next bit should interest anyone who's studied cult recruitment techniques. Military training necessarily involves breaking down individual identity and rebuilding it around group values. And while this serves legitimate military purposes, it's also a form of conditioning. It prepares people to carry out actions they might otherwise question. So the bonds formed between soldiers are uniquely powerful. War correspondent Sebastian Junger observed that the willingness to die for another person is a form of love that most religions even fail to inspire. And these intense connections create conditions where loyalty to comrades can override personal moral consideration. So during my time in the police, I've seen similar bonding on a smaller scale, because that thin blue line mentality really does exist and can be powerful. I remember as a young police officer one night being out on patrol, and we came round the corner. We were in a Panda, and we came round the corner, and there was about maybe 200 people hanging about outside the hot dog stand after the disco had the disco. It sounds ridiculous. After the disco had spilled, and this was when everything shut at 1 o'clock. So they hang about, and what happens is they get into the odd fight or whatever, and we go in and mop up the pieces. But there's a lot of people there, and there was only 12 of us on the shift to cover the whole town of Irvine. And we parks the car, looks out, and there's a stramash going on at the top of the street. And I'm looking up and I'm thinking, hold on. Because the sergeant's Panda car was parked opposite where this stramash was. And then we looked further, and the two sergeants are on the deck getting a kicking. Now, you got to remember, there's about 200 people here, and most of them aren't really bothered about that, but there's a group getting right into these two police officers. And rather than just sit back and call for backup and wait until we've got mobs, your immediate instinct is your muckers are getting a kicking. So you just run in. You just go. Because it's, you don't even think about what might happen to you. You just go because you got to render assistance to the people that you work with. And that's just a police situation. Imagine that in a war situation where you are literally relying on your people around you to keep you alive in every particular situation indeed. And I even see differences in the way that I approach things. Because once you've had this kind of shared experience, and any soldiers out there, or sailors, or RAF, well, okay, yeah, I know, I'm reaching, but the RAF get a real hard time from the other two services. But it also happens amongst others, like ambulance men and firemen and prison officers, all these kind of, security service type kind of things. You end up with this kind of bond, and you feel comfortable when you're in that kind of group. And obviously it is because of the way that you've been treated and the way that you've been conditioned to a degree. Because even though we go on, for instance, we go in Fortnite sometimes, and the guys in Isle play, and I take it really seriously because we're in a situation where our avatars are going to die. And they're just having fun. But for me, it's slightly different. I really get annoyed. And I think that's just the conditioning. I was thinking about it, and I'm thinking maybe that's a conditioning thing from this. I'm hoping the stream's okay, because this thing is flagging up loads of errors and saying it's poor, but, I'll fix it for the next time if it's not. And I'll certainly fix it for tomorrow night when we're back on with Ed, 9 o'clock UK time. Ed and I will be doing a deep dive into something different tomorrow. I think we might be going to Ecuador. Not the song. Thank you guys. Right, so anyway, the military does take this to a completely different level. And this is where we look at the dark side of training, because some military units have histories of abusive practices that reinforce obedience. From the brutal Dedovshchina hazing in Russian forces to documented abuses at the UK Army's Foundation College in Harrogate. And these aren't just toughening up exercises. They're systematic breaking of individual will. In the most extreme cases, these include sexual assault during initiation ceremonies. And this isn't about creating soldiers. It's about creating unquestioning compliance. And obviously, not all military training involves abuse, but some of it does happen, and we need to acknowledge that these documented patterns exist. And even if I go back, I remember when we joined the police, the first thing that happens is you walk in and, you think you're joining a civilized organisation, and there's a guy standing there in full police uniform with the cane, and he's the drill sergeant, and he is pressed to the nines. His boots, you can literally see your face in them because they are so shiny. And he's got his peak slashed so you can barely see his eyes. And he's standing there, erect and very, very present. And you walk up to sign in and he points his cane at you, and goes, "What are those?" And I'm like, I've no fucking idea, but I'm going, "Sideburns, sir?" And the first thing you get is, "You never call me sir. I'm a sergeant. I work for a living." Because the drill sergeants, obviously, they go to Catterick and do all the drill at Catterick. And this is why the police can actually march. Because certainly for the Scottish police, all our drill sergeants were trained at Catterick and then taken back up into the college and would train us. So even from the word go, they start to tear you apart. And you when you look back on it, you can see it. But joining the police as a young man of 21 or whatever, it's completely different. And then there's that kind of camaraderie there that extends not just to the police in Scotland, but to police all over. And you end up making friends with other police officers in other areas and even different countries. And once you're a cop, you always seem to be a cop. You know, you can always talk to other cops. I've got photographs sitting on Harleys in New York and, talking to cops in Florida and cops in Slovakia. So, and I even got off with a motorway fine in Germany because I was a cop. So that kind of thing happens. And I think the army happens to a degree, but you don't see other army. It's harder to see other army people. And I think that's probably why we have things like, social clubs and community centres that cater for that type of grouping. But for many service members, disillusionment begins when they confront the disconnect between what they thought they were fighting for and the operational realities of what they were doing. And again, I can call back my own personal experience because I've been in the police a few years and I was thinking, we spend more time looking after property than we do after people. And you think that's not what it's supposed to be. You're supposed to be looking after people, not property. Property, yes, but it shouldn't be the priority. And philosophers have argued that soldiers are exploited insofar as they're pressured to shoulder additional moral responsibilities, morally deliberate roles, and moral risks. That concept of moral risk, the risk of committing serious moral wrongdoing, is rarely explained during recruitment. These practices exacerbate and concentrate moral risk exposure, particularly when we're targeting youth from deprived areas. Think about it. We're asking 18-year-olds to potentially make life or death decisions when their brains aren't even fully developed. How many of us at 18 fully understood the complex moral from idealist to instrument, the transformation, the awakening, when idealism meets reality? It's all territory that we'd have to navigate in adult life. So if we look at the Afghanistan effect, the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan after 20 years of conflict accelerated this disillusionment for many. Trust in the US military dropped to 60%. That's the lowest level it's been in 2 decades. And for those who served there, and for those who fell, they didn't get the chance to question, but those who served there questioning the purpose of their sacrifice can actually be quite devastating. And after experiencing the intensity of military life, many veterans struggle to find comparable meaning in civilian society. As Junger notes, the defence of the tribe is an insanely compelling idea. And once you've been exposed to it, there's almost nothing else you would rather do. For those who participated in actions they later question, the moral injury can be profound. Unlike PTSD, which stems from fear, moral injury stems from guilt and moral confusion. And veterans need to reconcile their actions with their core values, often without adequate support. Remember, we're not talking about a few isolated cases here. This is a documented pattern that repeats generation after generation. Now, I'm not here to tell anyone not to join the military. That's a personal choice. What I am suggesting is that we need to demand more transparency about what service really means. Military recruiters rarely discuss moral injury, potential disillusionment, or the complex ethical territory that soldiers must navigate. The British Army has been accused of trying to exploit teenagers who lack self-confidence with misleading recruitment advertising. And that's not informed consent, folks. And we know all about informed consent after the last 5 years. It's pure and utter manipulation. And speaking of manipulation, look at the controversy around the Netflix show Adolescence, where a story that's based on real events was completely rejigged and falsely represented the main protagonist and his background. There is no doubt in my mind that this was manipulated by the writers, despite their claims to both generate views and to fall in line with the current societal narrative. They wanted to foster division between race and painting the lighter side in a bad light. And the obfuscation thrown up in confusing upbringing and cultural acceptabilities between very different societies was a clear manipulation of the viewing public and a blatant attempt at attacking digital platforms while marginalising parents. This show presents a simplified narrative to generate views. Military Recruitment presents a simplified narrative to generate recruits and obscures the deeper consequences of moral injury or toxic ideologies. I don't know if maybe I'm going a bit too far, but I think this is quite an important topic. And this is the kind of conversations that I think we need to have, and we need to retain the ability to have. We need to be able to question society. We need to be able to question our military. We need to be able to question our government. And we need to hold them to account. So recruitment practices have operated within a broader cultural context that often glorifies service while minimising its complexities and costs. And look, you know I'm not anti-military. I am a Navy brat. I came from a military family. And I think that's part of what drove me into the police, because I did consider joining both the RAF and the Royal Navy. And many, many good people serve honourably and find genuine fulfilment in military careers. But recruitment should be honest about both benefits and costs. And young people deserve to know what they're signing up for, not just the college tuition and the job skills, but the moral complexity and the potential psychological impacts. Because they may be standing behind a long-barreled weapon and having to make a decision whether someone continues to live or not. As always on this channel, we follow the evidence, and the evidence shows, and I have no problem in saying evidence shows systematic targeting of vulnerable populations with messaging that emphasises benefits while downplaying serious risks. That's not a conspiracy. That's documented fact. I'd like to hear from any veterans in the chat. What was your experience? Did reality match what recruiters promised? And your insights matter most in this conversation, because I might be talking nonsense. I have my own personal experiences from a less involved situation, you know, the thin blue line. It's quite hard to put yourself in the mind of someone who has had that bond and then had it taken away. And when that moment comes, or sometimes it doesn't, when that moment comes when you realise that instead of fighting for Queen and country and your family back home, you were fighting for the government and corporate interests. And that can crush people. So remember, question everything, especially when someone's trying to sell you a noble purpose that benefits interests other than your own. That's not cynicism. That's critical thinking, and that's what we encourage on this channel. So what do you guys think? Did I go too far? Or is that a reasonable question to be asking yourselves? I can't remember what you said on Twitter, Ray. Sorry. But yeah, I think everybody's different. Everybody takes things in a different way as well. But I still think there's a lot of, shall we say, applying the narrative when it comes to trying to get people into the services. And really, people do need to join with their eyes open. And I would hope that a lot of people do, but some people just look at it as a way out. Particularly in the States, I think, where things are very expensive, and it's one way of getting a college education, one way of getting healthcare. It's one way of improving your social circumstances. Anyway, yeah, well, no, you're right, Ray. Some people do that, yeah, and most people start off that way, and so I think Ray's saying that, you know, it's like people that have been programmed or brainwashed, and we saw it happen. We saw it happen to people, you know, only a few years ago when they all stood out in the street and clapped for an organisation that wasn't listening. And really, what was all that about? Who thought that was a great idea? That is nudge unit kind of, well, it's not kind of, that is nudge units working to try and have the population going down one route, nobody questioning. That's exactly what people do in the military. They change your thinking so as that you will obey things and without question. And you're not really trained to use a lot of initiative if you're a grunt. You just want them to go out and do the job. Of course, when people start questioning things, that's when they start to make up their own mind, and that's when they become even more dangerous. Because people that question your orders might then see past the fact that they're not your orders. They're not even the government's orders. They're maybe coming from a corporation. And you end up fighting in a far-off land for oil rights or poppies. It's quite sad. And think of the people that died and the families that lost them. What do they think? Anyway, I think that's probably enough for this evening. It's quite intense, that one. We'll leave that at that. I hope you've enjoyed it to a certain degree, but I do like to challenge, and I like to challenge your thinking. Put a different light on this evening. Let me know what you think, if it's better or worse. There's certainly a lot more light here. I think I'm getting a suntan. So with that, remember, stay critical, keep thinking, and nil's a legitimus carandum. Good night.